Hello, dear listener. My name is Tony Coe, and welcome back to another episode of the Refinement, Not Retirement podcast, which I co present with my darling bride, Christine, who's speaking to us today from another part of the house, the kitchen, whereas I'm in the office here in Elmley Castle, a beautiful,
What's new? Always in the kitchen.
always in the kitchen. I'm not going to say that, beautiful medieval village of Elmley Castle in the northwest point, at the northwest point of the Cotswolds. So today is part two of our narrowboat experience after a quick interlude where I went off and discussed my feelings about quitting work, and then Christine came on and gave a reaction video after only hearing them a couple of minutes before. So you got the raw emotion of Christine reacting to what I had to say. So those are the last two episodes if you want to check back there. But before that, we did part one of the narrowboat experience. And this is telling the story of how we bought and sold a narrowboat in a space of only 1 year, going from falling in love at first sight to falling out of love, which we have not yet come to. We've got up to the point in the story where we chose to buy Tickety-Boo. We found her and we got to the point where we put a deposit down, and we're now going to take that story to the next stage. I'm in two minds about how much detail to go into, because there is so much to say about this story, really. But this podcast version of it is going to be rather treetop. We're not going to get into names and things, names of people involved and what have you. We're just going to tell the story to give you an idea, a flavor of how it was that we made this 180-degree turn in the space of a year. So, Chris, we got to the point of putting down a 5% deposit. We agreed a price. I think you, as you always tend to do, you are such a great negotiator, and you got a good. I think you got a good deal. We were fortunate, weren't we? Because we really got ahead of the rush to buy narrow. This was in COVID, after we'd just been let out. We'd found our house. We were buying a
We
narrow.
hadn't found our house.
Oh, hadn't we? Okay, so we
No.
were sort of quite well into. This was we put the deposit down in June of.
Oh yes. No, sorry. Well, when we put the deposit down, we hadn't found the house,
Okay.
but we did. So we'd found Tickety-Boo before we found the house. But my memory is that by the time we had found our house in the interim, bought it even before we'd finished buying Tickety-Boo. I think that's how it went.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I think we always tend to say, don't we, that buying the house was actually quicker and easier than buying the narrowboat.
it was. Yes,
But
yes.
for details that we'll tell you, for reasons that we'll tell you as we go along here. But what I'm saying is, it was all about the time of the COVID coming to the end of the being locked down, and we were fortunate in two respects. One, we found and agreed a purchase of our house before the madness started, when prices started shooting up for properties that were outside of cities, because so many people were escaping like we did. But also the same thing happened with camper vans and narrowboats, and
Yes.
we got in just ahead of that, which helped us a lot when we came to sell Tickety-Boo. But at this point, we had, as I say, put down a 5% deposit using a credit card, and that bit was very easy. We were very thrilled and excited. The next thing we needed to do was to get a marine survey carried out. So although I've had boats one way or another throughout much of my life, I'd never, and I'd been on narrowboat holidays many times, and always enjoyed the experience. But I never had the experience of buying or owning a narrowboat. And so this was new territory for me, and I had to do a lot of research to get up to speed. But I mean, there's some quite sort of odd things about narrowboats. There's no real register of who owns it. So you have when you're buying from someone, you have to sort of do your best in terms of getting the necessary paperwork from the seller to establish that they are really entitled to sell it. There's no finance on it, that sort of thing. The other thing that you have to do, rather like, well, you don't have to do with a house anymore because it's become easier, I think, since I first started in the property business. But certainly with a boat, you need a proper marine survey to establish what you're buying is not going to sink, or that there's some fundamental problem with her. So
we had to have that, didn't we?
Well, we didn't have to. You can buy one without,
didn't we?
But I think no, you'd be nuts. You'd be nuts to go ahead, I think, with a narrowboat purchase without having a survey. And in fact, you may remember the day that we put down the deposit, they gave us a list of surveyors.
Yes, I remember that.
And that sort of always makes you a little bit concerned, doesn't it? Because the people that are trying to sell you the boat are also giving you a list of surveyors, and you're wondering, well, will they be impartial? But I looked down the list and did some research, and the guy that we chose had from what I could tell, a very good reputation, and I was very sort of satisfied with the way he dealt with the sort of talking to me, explaining the process and so on. So you have to, I must stop saying you have to get a survey, because you don't have to get a survey, but it's very much in your interest to get a survey. So you have to pay for that. So let's say that's the best part of £1,000 probably.
Yeah, that's not cheap, is it?
Not cheap. But you also have to pay for having the narrowboat taken out of the water with a crane, which is also not cheap. It's probably about the same price as the survey itself, maybe a little bit less. But in order for a proper survey to be carried out, it's no good for the boat being in the water, because the main thing they look at is the hull. So they need to establish the condition of the hull. Narrowboats are made of steel. And if there is any rust formation, it starts to obviously erode the integrity of the hull, and you start getting leakage, which you definitely don't want. I think we found the surveyor, as I say. Well, that was easy because they gave us a list, and we just established who was likely to be a good guy to use. Instructed him, and we received the survey. Do you remember it was about mid-June we received the survey, mid-June.
Well, it was a long time, if you remember, because again, everybody was starting to buy narrowboats, and so the getting it booked in and getting it out of the water was a few weeks, because remember, we were anxious to get on with it, and we had to wait before he could even get it booked in to take it out of the water, and then we had to wait for the survey. So that was frustrating, if I remember rightly. It just seemed to go on and on and on. Yeah. But anyway, in the hindsight, you're right, looking back now. But at the time, the time, it just felt a bit of a while.
Well, also, we were very excited, and we just want to get on with it. We didn't want to lose her, did we? Because,
no, exactly.
It was ideal. The boat was ideal for us, and we've never really had it, and still don't have a bad word to say about the boat. So we got the survey results on the 14th of June. We'd gone it was still sort of lockdowny in those days. Everybody was a little bit cautious. We were allowed, it wasn't a full lockdown. I think we were allowed to go out and stuff, but we went for a walk in Shepperton, and we got the survey through, and then you and I went through it with a fine tooth comb. I always ask you to look at things because you tend to see things that I've missed. Which I know you did in this case. So there were some things in the survey. There was nothing really that was a major concern. It was a deal breaker, but there were some things that he had picked up, which we needed to go back to the seller and have a bit of a renegotiation. And they gave us the contract paperwork is actually very professionally done. It's a substantial sort of contract that you sign, and it sets out everything. But the thing that, I was looking through it in preparation for this episode, and I was thinking to myself, well, that side of it is all very professional. And yet when you actually try to, from a buyer's point of view, you try to get them, the boat brokerage, to act sort of in accordance with the train track journey that they'd set out in their paperwork, they don't seem to want to. They just seem to want people to sign it, pay over, and just give them the least hassle, the least trouble possible. And of course, you and I, Chris, we've run a international relocation firm for 30 odd years, and our meat and potatoes is dealing with providers, suppliers, and looking after clients' interests. So we do.
Yes, and you're a contract man, and so we'd have to do that with the fine code. But when we're doing this way round, this was to protect ourselves.
Yeah,
and I think, as you said, it was. I think that we soon cottoned on very quickly that the type of people, the boatyard people that we were dealing with, are probably the same everywhere. They've got a very laid back attitude, and they look at it as it's not a house you're buying, it's a boat.
in fact, he kept saying that, didn't he? Do you remember?
They kept saying,
it's only
yes, they kept saying,
only
well,
a boat.
it's just a boat, it's as if it wasn't a lot of money. It was a lot of money to us.
Yeah.
But their attitude, well, compared to a boat, compared to a house, it wasn't a lot of money. And why were we making difficulties, which I'm sure you're going to explain? But it was like, well, okay, we've got the survey done, we've gone through the process, you've given us a contract, so now, back to you. So that's where we kind of suddenly started hitting.
Yeah, well, the point I was getting to about the paperwork and what I called the train track that gives you to run on in the negotiation, it was very, very clear that the deal that we had come to for the boat was subject to a full out of water survey. That's what their words. That's what we agreed to.
Yes.
So obviously, if we get a survey and it says there are these 5 things that need to be attended to, we'd be stupid not to go back to them and say, look, these 5 things have been brought up. And what I was trying to do in that was to say, look, what is the seller's position? But the boat brokerage people that we were dealing with just kept waffling about it's only a boat, it's only a boat. Well, what does that mean? What I was saying, and eventually I had to get fairly robust, is to say, look, we just need to know what the seller is prepared to do and is not prepared to do, because then we can make a decision.
Whether to continue with the sale, right?
Absolutely. So just to give one example, because I'm not going to go into greater detail, but one example was concern that the surveyor had over the freshwater tank, because a narrowboat obviously, has a place on the boat where you store water. Water is obviously an essential part of living. And the sales particulars, it had been represented that the freshwater tank was stainless steel, which is the bee's knees. That's what you want, stainless steel, really, because that's the best, most sort of hygienic, maintenance-free system that you can have. But the surveyor was saying is, no, it isn't a stainless steel tank. It is part of the hull. In other words, it's like every other part of the hull. It's subject to rust and degeneration through water erosion, etc. So eventually it turned out, after some painful back and forth, that it was indeed part of the hull and not as represented a stainless steel tank. The arms were thrown up, though. Oh, you're so, essentially they were saying, you're so picky, this sort of thing. There are other things as well, by the way, but I just mentioned this as one example. And at the end of the day, to cut a very long story short, they agreed, it was agreed that there was a reduction that took account of that. I had to do all the research myself. The surveyor was very helpful. He referred me to a boatyard who I will name because I thought they were excellent, called Street Hayes. And the guy there, Tom, spent a long time on the phone with me explaining the implications of this hull, not a stainless steel, but a hull, a water tank in the hull. He explained all that and what needed to be done, what the best approach was. And as a result of that conversation, I was able to go back and say, negotiate a reduction. But what was clear is that us doing what would be regarded as perfectly normal, a professional approach to a negotiation, was regarded by the boat brokerage as like we were some very overbearing kind of people. And it was really quite extraordinary, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very well. It was very upsetting, and I was crossing half. My body felt very upset, but it also felt very cross because I felt we were treated really with such, is animosity the right word?
Well, I think it was sort of offhandedness. I mean,
yeah.
We've found out since just how what umbrage they'd taken, and that feeds into another part of the story which we won't have time to deal with today. But we found out later that for some reason they had taken extraordinary offence. And that's much later in the story. But how much offence they had taken, we found out much later in the story. But we quickly found out that they weren't very happy with us. As the negotiation proceeded, we were entitled to what is called a sea trial, rather strangely called a sea trial when it's a canal boat. Obviously, take it on the sea. But you have the purchase is also subject to an actual trial on the water, and I had to sort of keep reminding them that this was part of the deal. We needed to have it needed to be an effective trial and so on and so forth. But it was sort of belittled that part of the transaction was belittled to the point of, oh, well, you just sort of go out for a trip around the marina when you come to collect the boat, which didn't make a lot of sense to me. But I think sort of having gone back through my journal entries and so on, I think that our attitude at the time, we just accepted, at the end of the day, we just kind of accepted that this was the way it was. And we had to, if we wanted this boat, we had to go along with it and just, take a certain amount.
It was their contract though, Tony, wasn't it? I mean, we hadn't written the contract. They're the ones who'd written it, but they didn't want to uphold. Maybe I think probably it would be the contract. Well, obviously it would have been drawn up by lawyers, solicitors, but the people working there.
I mean, I had no problem with the contract. It was a good contract. And in fact, the contract itself gave me more confidence. Because
but the workers, the people, running the place and interacting with us,
the salespeople
didn't clearly like it. The salespeople thought it was a load of nonsense.
I mean, to be honest, they weren't professional. I mean,
they weren't professional,
and they reacted in a very emotional way to this, and
very unkind people.
If you remember, it came to the day in July, early July, when we departed to have our sea trial. And you may remember we took some personal items to put on board because
that was kind of them, because they did say we could do that.
Well,
that was very good of them.
Yes, they did. But we had insisted that it wasn't going to be a pickup, time that we collected the boat. It was going to be a trial for the purposes of a trial. But the two main guys in the boat brokerage office, they totally ghosted us. I think the new modern expression is that day. Well, not totally, but they were they greeted us, not even greeted us.
Well, they didn't greet us.
Cold towards us, and they were sort of showing. They were like school children who were having a huff, and they wanted to make clear that we were no longer friends. And they made it, just sort of what was an exciting day for us. They made it, quite the opposite.
And we'd driven, I mean, it was a good 3.5 hour drive up there
It
from
was a
our
long,
home in London,
it was a long
or
drive.
longer than that for us.
You know,
So yes, yeah, they kept trying to avoid us. They were busy doing this, busy doing that, doing this, busy doing that. And every time we went to
they had a guy, you know, one of not a sales guy, but some other guy who was actually very nice, and you know,
lived on the boat, a narrowboat in
he
that
lived on a
marina, if I
narrowboat. He
remember
was,
rightly.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
quite right about that. He took us out. We weren't allowed to handle the boat at all, and it didn't go out of the marina. So, you know, it really wasn't an effective trial. But no matter, you know, you were in the, I remember you were in the kitchen and you'd already sort of got settled down and you were excited. Just you were checking out everything down there, and I think you were very happy. I remember, because I wanted to be sure that you were happy with the purchase, and it was quite clear that you were. He essentially, the guy who took us out, said, you know, because I had lots and lots of questions about equipment and so on and so forth. Look, don't worry, you know, we'll answer everything on the day that you collect her. So it sort of brushed off. And thank goodness that the boat actually turned out to be fine, really, in the end, because we weren't going to get any satisfaction from this so-called trial. He made an excuse that it was too windy to go out on the cut, which is the word for the canal, onto the canal itself. And we weren't longer than 30 minutes maximum motoring, but the engine sounded fine to me. It didn't, there was no hiccups from that mechanical side point of view. And so we went away, I think, feeling okay, but feeling very disappointed, I think, that we were treated in such an offhand way. And then the next part of the story is when we actually, you know, we'd paid over the money and we went to pick her up. And you may remember, and you will remember, that we'd by now contracted with the marina where we were going to keep her, which was about a little under 1 week's full cruise away from where we were going to pick her up. So this was very exciting for us. We were going to be with our new boat for, you know, best part of a week cruising. So this would be you know, really be an acid test of what kind of a boat she was.
Nima, can I just jump in? We had now bought our house, and we were moving in around about the 20th of July, and I think if you remember, we decided you wanted to get her before we moved in, and I wanted to do the opposite. I said, let's move in, which we did on the 20th of July. Let's have a couple of weeks to settle in here. The marina, you know, we kept the boat at the marina, although she was ours. We did pay extra rent for the weeks she was in there. And then it was agreed that we would pick her up on the 1st of August after we'd had a couple of weeks to settle into the house, which I think, you know, now in hindsight, it was definitely the right way to do it. We were in the house, we were sort of settled, and off we went, as you said, to on the 1st of August to pick her up.
Yes, that's quite right. So we took our car, by then our Kona electric car. We took her and dropped her off at the destination marina.
Oh yes, I'd forgotten that
one. And we got a long taxi ride from that marina back up to where Tickety-Boo was moored, where we'd bought her from. So the idea obviously was for us to cruise back to our car in about a week's time. So we again now I guess we'd paid over the money completely, and you know, the boat was ours and so forth. And they were absolutely appalling that day, weren't they? The boat brokers.
Yes, dreadful.
You know, they didn't greet us. They just kept. We arrived there, you know, at about 10.
Far too busy to talk to us
in the morning. Well, they were clearly, and it wasn't too busy. They clearly didn't want to have anything to do with us, apart from, you know, the final, I don't know, briefing, because that's what the guy that dealt with us on the trial had said. You know, don't worry, you'll be briefed on everything. when you come to collect her, because he couldn't answer a lot of questions.
Well, he did it again, didn't he?
But he did it again, and he didn't have any more answers.
No, no, exactly. And we had to
up.
wait a long time, if you remember.
Hours and hours. So two things happened while we waited. First of all, some guy, while we were loading up, because we had a lot of stuff to put on board, of course. As we were loading up, there was a couple on the dock side, on the marina side, who said, "Oh, you've bought a good boat there," and they had known the couple that owned Tickety-Boo. I think the name of the owner was Stuart, and his wife, I think her name was my sister's name, Louise, from what he said. And they said, you know, that unfortunately through ill health, the husband had decided that they needed to sell her, and so they did that. But you know, that we felt, let's put it this way, we felt good because, you know, here was a couple, they knew that the owners of the boat, and obviously they were people who loved her. It was quite clear that in the way she was being kept, how nicely she had been kept. But so we did them. We also met another couple, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, I'm doing this from memory, but we met a couple who had bought a wide beam boat brand new from the same brokerage that they were dealing with, and I think they were going off to right to the Mediterranean or somewhere. Or
yeah, they were going to go across the channel. Yes, yeah.
But they were unhappy with the way they were treated too, and this was a theme that, as we got to know more people on the canal, it was a theme that sort of came out about this the company that we were dealing with. That really there was quite a lot of unhappiness with the offhanded way that people, customers were being dealt with. And this guy, had been waiting, and I can't remember the exact details, but he wasn't. Let's put it this way: he wasn't at all happy.
And they couldn't move because of COVID, so they were stuck there as well. So it made it 10 times worse for them, stuck in this marina with very unhelpful, unpleasant people, having spent, an awful lot of money. I mean, it was a huge, beautiful wide beam berth, but hundreds of thousands, I think, wasn't it? It was a lot of money.
Now, I'd made it very clear to the brokerage that we were going on our maiden voyage, as it were, for the best part of a week, and we didn't want to have to be coming back to them all the time with things that weren't right. So please, can you make sure everything's okay? They assured me they would. Well, you can remember the gas bottle was empty completely, and they didn't even have any gas at the marina. So we were going off on this trip, and no attempt had been made. Also, it was only because you persuaded them to fill it up with fresh water that they were prepared even to do that. So we had to buy gas. We had to buy a spanner because there was no way of putting it in. And the guy that actually looked after the same guy who did the trial was actually very good, really, because he did go out of his way. He did go out of his way to try and deal with it, and he made it very clear, this isn't really my job. The sales guys.
Well, you'd bought though. If you remember, you got sent off to the shop to buy the gas. I
bought it, and then they didn't have any gas.
Got it. Then they didn't have any, so he had to go off and find somebody else. I don't know. I can't remember what he did.
Yeah, no. So eventually, I think he took it off another boat. So he, he did go above and beyond.
He did, yes.
I mean, I wouldn't say the company went anywhere near the a reasonable level, but he did, in spite of all that, he did make an effort. And anyway, we got the boat watered, we got the boat fueled, we finally got gas, and we went off on our merry way for our voyage, and we were very happy. We were thrilled. I mean, we had I can remember the first sort of doing the first few locks and the first few sort of intricate maneuvers, and feeling very comfortable at the helm of this boat. And I felt she handled really nicely. I think you were very happy with the stuff below deck.
I mean, I don't think the cooker had even been used. The weather was gorgeous. The sun was shining.
Yep, it was.
All the canals we went down on were really beautiful.
Yeah. So we went along the Trent and Mersey Canal. for a full day. We turned left at Fradley Junction onto the Coventry Canal, and then eventually we ended up on the Oxford Canal, where we found our our destination marina. So that there was a lot of good stuff that went on in those days. I was reading over the journal today, and it would take far too long to go into it. But I think I think that it was a really lovely experience, and we were looking forward to our ownership experience with this boat. There were some things that sort of arose during the trip that sort of gave a clue as to why we would ultimately decide that it wasn't for us, and perhaps we'll touch on those in part 3, when we'll get into the nitty-gritty of why things turned sour, and why a day came when we said it's not for us. But we're on the point of our half hour here. We like to keep these episodes, we think a sweet spot is about 30 minutes. So we're going to break off at this point and say to you, please, well, thank you first of all for we're in pre-launch at the moment. We haven't launched our podcast, Refinement Not Retirement, into the full public domain. We will be doing that very shortly. We wanted to get a few episodes in the can, which we now have, so we are on the point of going public. But we have had we have sort of put it out to a limited audience, and we've had some great feedback on some of the things that we've had to say so far. So thank you for that. Keep it coming. We love to hear from you. We love your ideas. And if you've got any experience with this whole narrowboat thing, we'd love to, we'd love to hear them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really would love to hear them. And we've come to a time in our lives when, now that we're not working anymore, it's lovely to be able to do these things, have this extra dimension to our life, and we love to share experiences with others. So
there might even be some people that are even picking up by what we've said, who probably might even know this marina. So that'll be interesting, any feedback, because I don't think it'll take too many people long who've had the same bad experience, and I'm sure there has been. I can't believe we're the only couple in the world with it.
The purchase experience is one thing. We had another experience which was horrendous, which we will be sharing with you. But yeah, if you have any experience that you'd like to share with us, we'd love to hear it. Maybe we'll get you on the show and exchange some experiences together. But for now, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me, everybody. Bye-bye.
See you next time. Thank you. Bye.